Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. This week I'm reviewing the episode Rational Man, and we kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives, all the things I enjoyed about this particular episode. I found the action sequences and the artwork in general to be really fantastic. It's nice to see Crawler training to use his powers and trying to be a hero, and I like the direction that they seem to be taking things towards the end of this episode. Just quickly before we get too far into this review, I'm just going to say that this is a re-recording. I recorded this review yesterday. I wasn't feeling too well and it didn't sound that great to me, so here I am feeling much better and much more in focus, and we'll kick off actually talking about stuff for the actual episode itself. Now, it may seem weird for me to talk about stuff towards the latter half of the episode at the start of this review, but hey ho, with these reviews there's typically a tradition where I talk about the animation and such like towards the start of it, and well, this is as close to animation as you can really get in a manga. I have to say that the illustration work in this episode is really fantastic. It is brimming with personality and a flair which makes it a thrill to read. I have to admit that this is the first episode that I've really just taken notice of the backgrounds and the background art. That's not because I was disappointed by what was happening in the foreground, but this is the first time that it really made me appreciate what I'm seeing here. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if this is something that has improved over the course of the previous few volumes, but now it gives us this sense of place, this sense of a location that I don't really think we've had in the previous episodes. Or at least in the previous volumes, I should say. Maybe I'm misremembering things, maybe I didn't pay much attention in the previous ones, but like I say, this makes it all feel as though we're in some real lived-in location. Though I will state that I do think that the paper that this manga is printed on does undermine that fact. The version that I have is just that typical paperback quality, or it's that kind of slightly tan colour, which does degrade the overall visual quality, and it's something that will only get worse with time. If this was printed in some big A4 print on some nice crisp white paper, like my Judge Dredd omnibuses were, that would have been fantastic, but hey ho, I can't hold that against the actual manga itself. The level of detail that we get in each shot, particularly when it comes to the background stuff, it gives it a level of creativity, a level of sense of place that it almost feels like reading an anime in a weird kind of way. You know, like you used to be able to get in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, where you'd get the comic book version of certain movies and they just use shots from the movies. It's something, a kind of similar feeling to that, but maybe not quite as lazy as that. I do like the shot composition and within the panels themselves, which helps to make the action sequence we get in the latter half of the episode look just so spectacular and make it so much brilliant fun. There is a great scope and flair to what we see that feels genuinely brilliant to me, and it's able to convey great speed and energy and the nature of the fighters taking part within it. It shows their technique and their ability, or lack thereof in the case of Crawler, when they're dealing with this strange new threat, and it's able to convey the power, the strength and the raw ferocity of this strange squid monster in a way which I really do like. It has a sense of presence to it that makes it feel strong and powerful. This is a terrifying creation that's chasing our hero down because, let's face it, Crawler really can't win a fight because he's so lame, in a way that's kind of endearing, as I mentioned in previous episodes. I will say that I am willing to forgive erasers present in this episode for the most part, mostly due to the fact that I think the integration into that final fight towards the end of this episode is well done. A lot of that comes down to the artwork and choreography of his fight therein, as it does give us a better sense as to how he fights as a hero. We haven't really seen much of that within the series thus far, and we didn't really see much of it within the main series. Here we get an idea of just what an agile, quick-witted and quick-footed fighter that he is. This creates a very fast-paced confrontation, with some really sharp, tight panel work to help convey that sense of pace. And it shows just what kind, like I say, a kind of fighter that they are, and how they are in some regards similar to Crawler. They're not going to beat their opponent on just raw strength. They've got to find a way around them, find that weak spot, or find a way of wearing them down, which makes for an interesting pairing between these two fighters. It's not like Crawler and Knuckle Duster, where Knuckle Duster is just this force of nature that he can beat this super evilness out of somebody, or like All Might, who's able to just punch people into low orbit. This is a whole different kind of ball game here. As we move into other discussions about this episode, it's really fun for me to just see how Crawler is trying to get his head around this new aspect of his quirk, this whole thing that he's able to just shoot sharp bursts of air out of his hands, or beams of energy, or whatever it's supposed to be. It's kind of hard to tell with the artwork, but whatever, we'll just say it's like condensed air or something like that. And I like seeing how he's trying to learn how to use it, and how the training that he's trying to get to use to get a better understanding of it. In other anime series, you see characters training to get a power and then they get it. Here it's the opposite. He already has this power, he's just training how to use it, how to get a better grasp of it. And he's doing that with whatever limited equipment he has and trying to keep it within the rule of law. All he has here is a handful of soup cans and a cardboard box, and he's trying to use that to develop a superpower that he hopes is going to help him save the day and become something that is iconic to him, something that's a keystone of his fighting abilities. And he's just doing it with household items. I really do dig that. This is not a character that has access to multi-million-dollar training facilities like the main cast do in the main series. He doesn't have a hyperbolic time chamber. There is no mystical training realm that they have to go to fight. It's just a guy in what functionally is his backyard with a few soup cans trying to figure this out. I love that, and it gives it a sense of grounding that really makes me like this series. It's the kind of thing that, again, I would have liked to seen in Kick-Ass had Kick-Ass not been so content with sniffing its own farts with how edgy it could be. But that's a debate and discussion for a whole other time. But of course, there's still a sense of jeopardy here. There's still some sense of risk and stakes, because if he gets seen doing this, if he gets seen using his quirk, he could get in trouble, he could get arrested. Oh, sure, he might likely only get a fine, but even still, it just put him in a position where someone could figure out, oh, this might be that Cruller guy that we've been hearing so much about recently, which, you know, is a possibility. Though, to be fair, that I'm still of the opinion that actually the police being able to figure out that Crawler is the Cruller is a lot harder than I think the writing is really making it out to be. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, Crawler is just a guy with a hoodie. That's all he is. A guy with a hoodie that's based around a successful thing. Like, he's no different than, oh, this guy was wearing a Captain America hoodie or wearing a Batman hoodie. It's that just distinct and generic that it would be incredibly hard to find him, or I should say, as indistinct and generic as if he were just wearing any kind of superhero merchandise thing. Oh, he had a T-shirt on that had the Captain America symbol on. Okay, so does thousands of millions of other people in the world. That doesn't help. And he has a very common and very mundane superpower, which again doesn't help. I do like the way that all this stuff is handled, as short as it is, because it has a good nature and a spirit to it. I do wish that we saw more here, but I do feel as though I understand as to why they didn't go down that path, because whilst I do think that it did lend itself to a nice potential slice of character drama and character comedy and slapstick, it avoided it because I can't help but feel that they didn't want Crawler to seem too much like a dope. They didn't want him to seem like the comic relief in his own life story. Yes, he is a bit bungling. Yes, he does get in over his head too much, but I don't think they wanted to push that too far, because I understand that for certain anime and manga fans, and I say this because despite the content of the channel over the past few years, I'm not really an anime and manga person. I understand that for certain audiences, having a character that is just that bungling and that inept would be something they're not terribly keen on, so I understand why they've been erring away from going down that too far. The latter half of the episode itself focuses more on the stuff with Eraserhead and that scene that we get with the recycle hoppers, which it's distinct. It really does it does feel distinct, and it does draw that line between the difference between My Hero Academia and Vigilantes tonally, because we have these two guys selling drugs out of the back of their shop, but they're not selling like, you know, the kind of typical things that you'd expect. They're selling pills to help with erectile dysfunction and male pattern baldness. Dick pills and hair growth stuff. Because it's Vigilantes, baby, and that's the tone that we're going for. It feels like an odd element to add into things, and again, it is a fine enough way in showing a distinction tonally between this series and the main series, though I will admit I'm not really sure that we really need jokes like this to establish that different tone, because the difference is already clear by the subject matter and how it's dealing with that subject matter, for better for worse. But hey ho, different strokes for different folks, and this then pivots into Eraserhead once again stopping up for a coffee before work. And it is neat to see him in a more casual setting, as it helps to give us a greater insight into his mindset at this particular moment in his life, and gives us a sense of his personality in a way that we never really saw him in the main series. In the main series, it's a few years down the line, he has everything that's happened to him in the years since then to reflect upon, and here and now, this is him being younger and relatively early into his career as a superhero. Understandable, great insight. Though I will grant you that it does feel odd, beyond just the sense of it does feel as though he's taking time away from the main cast. It feels odd because of the way that he carries himself and some of the things that he's saying. In the previous episode, he was talking about retiring. The way that he's displayed and he's shown, it makes it feel as though this is the kind of stuff that maybe present-day Eraserhead would be saying. Someone that's been a hero for an extended period of time, and they're now looking to get out of that life and to do something different. To retire or pivot into teaching or consulting or whatever else there may be for a hero that wants to step away from the cape and the superhero stuff. But we hear it feels odd because, again, he's far younger. He's far earlier into his career. So all these conversations and all the stuff that he's doing feels like stuff that should be something that an older hero should have. Someone that's probably closer to All Might's age in canon, or Gran Torino, or Knuckle Duster, rather than it being with Eraserhead. It feels odd. Not enough for me to condemn it over, but still it is a weird way to do it. Because I would be willing to forgive it if Eraserhead was a little bit more of an adolescently minded character. Because you know how certain younger people, they start to act a little bit older than they really are and just say stuff that they really shouldn't be saying at that age. Because it makes it seem as though they're trying to seem older and wiser than they are. And I've never got that vibe with Eraserhead, let alone with him at this point in his life. But I suppose that, you know, all of this is rather easy to do because it's just him drinking coffee. It's drawing after drawing of him sat there drinking coffee in pretty much every single panel that we've seen him in so far in this entire series. I suppose it's an easy way to create lifelike human images. They're not going to be short on stock images to use as references, but you know, I mean, it's not a criticism, but there comes a certain point that you can only see the same character doing almost exactly the same thing issue after issue before it starts to feel like it's taking the piss. Yes, I am of a reluctance to see him saving the day because it feels as though it's taking too much from the other characters, but I want to see him doing more than just going around to someone's house and drinking coffee. That's effectively all he does in this bloody program, or this manga series I should say. Of course, I shouldn't get too lost in that because it feels as though we're pivoting into the negatives and we're not doing that just yet. This, of course, then ends up leading on to Crawler, yet again getting in over his head whilst trying to save the day. And in a weird twist of events, I will say I was rather relieved to see that the guy that he was fighting against this week wasn't just some guy. It wasn't just some person that he met in the street that he upset. It's this big, scary-looking squid monster guy. And that is fine. It is a weird turn of events how a few volumes ago I was saying I was getting sick of seeing that stuff, but now I'm kind of happy to see it all again. It was, hopefully, there was a part of me that was interested to see how he could beat him. And then in the end he just decided, you know what, this is not good enough for me, I'm running away. Understandable, I get that. I wish that he'd made a little bit more of an effort to try and take this guy down, a little bit more of an opportunity to see him trying to save the day, but this then ends up leading to the scene where he accidentally outs himself as being a vigilante in front of Eraserhead. Well, he kind of does it by smashing a window, which maybe is the thing that makes Eraserhead go, hey, wait a minute, it's that guy, and hang on a minute, that guy might actually be the Crawler. because that's the name that everyone's still calling him. But it's the recycle hopper guys that really dob him into it and really chopping him into the mess, which, you know, it's a fine twist of events. I'm fine with that. I will credit this episode because it handles the big tonal shift of all of this very well. That we go from the more light-hearted, screwy stuff with Crawler trying to understand his superpower to then the stuff with the superhero stuff with him getting chased down, and it then pivoting from all of that to the stuff that we get with Eraserhead in the fight sequence. So we go from the wackiness of Crawler dropping himself into it and potentially getting arrested, and the whole social awkwardness of that, to Eraserhead getting into this fight with a villain that he soon realises that he can't defeat, and then accepting his fate and being under no illusion that he himself is out of his depth and might be about to get killed. And I like that aspect of it. I like that aspect of self-reflection with his character, that he isn't trying to make some kind of big, bold, defiant speech or trying to crawl and get away from all of this. He's just realising, yes, this is probably going to be the end of me, so let's just do my best to try and stop that being the case, or at least fight along until one of the other heroes can get here. Sure, we all know that he isn't going to get killed off by all of this, because this is a spin-off to a series that he's already alive and well in, which is set several years down the fact. If you're reading this before going on to read My Hero Academia, sure, you don't really know that. Though, of course, by this point, you're not going to be reading this without reading the main series, or watching the main series, so you get the idea. But I do like the fact they were still able to find a way at implementing some sense of character drama here. Even if we know that he's ultimately going to survive, the fact that he has this willingness to go, yeah, this is probably it, fine. I like that. That's an aspect that you don't often see in media like this, let alone with a fight like this. This is not him going up against the local big bad. He's not going against the end of volume villain. He's just going up against some mook and realising, oh crap, I can't deal with this, and yes, this is probably going to be the end of me. And I like that. I like that aspect, and I like the way that he's handled. With all of that said, however, I think it's time for us to pivot into the negatives, and I will admit that this negative that I'm about to give is one that I will almost immediately counteract, for reasons which will become clear when we get into it. But I'll just say here and now that I do feel as though there were some missed opportunities with what we had with Crawler training to use his power. That whole sequence of events where he's on the rooftop with the tins of beans or whatever they are, trying to train to use his power. I like the idea of that, I like the presentation of it, I like the tone, and I like the spirit of it. Great, fantastic, good, really great. I enjoyed that. I just wish that it went on, because it feels as though it's the equivalent of leaving money on the table. They're not really using this scene to its fullest. They're not really using this whole idea to its fullest. They might well do that more over the course of this volume, possibly even to the next one, depending on how all of this ends up going, but the fact that they cut it off so prematurely, for me, just feels, again, like a missed opportunity. Like they could have done something more here, but ultimately they didn't end up doing so. You could have easily extended this training stuff out to be something more than it is. Or more than what we got, I should say. With him training in different areas, trying different things, and the different shenanigans of him trying to hide it from pro-heroes that are making their way down the street. And him accidentally breaking windows, or setting off car alarms, or that kind of stuff. But we ultimately don't end up getting that. And instead we get more scenes of Eraserhead sitting around drinking coffee. Now, the counterpoint I will end up giving to this is twofold. Firstly, like I said earlier on, I get this distinct feeling that they're wanting to put a certain amount of control onto how wacky and silly all Crawler is. They don't want to push it too far because it might make them less relatable or too much of a goofball that audiences might not identify with, which I understand and respect. The other counterpoint to it is, well, it's not so much with this itself, but more so the philosophy that I have when it comes to reviewing stuff. I am very much of the, you can only really review what's in front of you, and you shouldn't, as a reviewer, talk about the stuff that you would rather have seen and the stuff that you think should have been in it, because at the end of the day, that's saying less about the material itself, and more about you, your creative processes, and how you are as an artist or a writer, what have you. And it does, after a certain point, feel like, less of a case of these are the things, these are the strengths and weaknesses of this particular thing, and becomes more like, hire me, hire me, hire me, look at all these great ideas I have, hire me, hire me, hire me, which I don't want to be the case here, and let's be honest, I would never get hired to do one of these things anyway. So, whilst I am disappointed that it doesn't do more with all of this, I have to respect that it did what it did, and what it did was good. And with all that said, let's get into the overview and say that this is a good episode. It's a solid episode that's able to ride the line of having more humorous and silly moments, yet also having some degree of dramatic weight to it. I'm not going to overplay the stuff that happened with Eraserhead towards the end of the episode. Him accepting his fate was not a major moment. It's ultimately just one line in one panel, rather than some major character development, but I do respect that it is there to add some sense of substance and weight to what we're witnessing here. But still, at the end of the day, this is an episode that's setting up for the next one, which will probably begin with the first half being the end of this fight sequence, and then a little bit with Crawler and Eraserhead coming to some kind of arrangement or what have you. Still, it is a strong episode. It's a good episode and a fun one for what it is, whilst I do wish it had done things differently, whilst I wish it had lent into certain things more so than others, I still think it is solid for what it is, and I'm interested to see what happens next week. Well, that said and done, however, let's get to Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, and despite thinking that this video would be relatively short, it isn't, so we'll do this as quickly as possible so you can all go back to enjoying your weekend. We kick off the comments with Sergeant Gurry, who says, "Good review, man. Thank you. I appreciate all the positive reinforcement I can possibly get." Our next comment comes from Big X1 that says, whilst I haven't read that far, I don't think you should get too bothered by the guinea pig line. Like you said, the way that My Hero Academia Vigilantes work, it could mean almost anything, and I don't think they'd be stupid enough to give the game away so quickly. Will admit I kind of reread that, and you get the idea, dyslexia, whatever. What I will say is that, well, it's a case of we'll just see. I mean, on the one hand, look, let's be honest, when it comes to anime and manga stuff, they are quite happy to just spoil stuff well ahead of time, so maybe they are doing that. It's just a different set of rules and language, I suppose, as far as to how these things are written versus other forms of media, so that might well be it, or it might just be a red herring. We'll soon find out as the series goes along, but until then, I'll say thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching. Let me know what you thought about this particular episode in the comment section down below, or you just want something nice to say to me, because that's always appreciated. Thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!